The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here, along with my former co-host and former Deputy Mayor and City Councilman, Tony Palmeri. And we're going to talk about all kinds of city issues tonight. So welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to dive right into them because I've only got you for half an hour here.
Let's do it.
Want to first talk about the city manager evaluation because that's been probably the most recent thing. And you were very instrumental in making that, I don't know about the process so much, but the end result very open to the public. And I think that was attempted last year, but I don't think it came out last year quite as open as this year.
Correct.
For people who maybe missed it or didn't understand really what's going on, can you just kind of talk a little bit about the process and why you think it's so important for this to be a very open and transparent, I know that word gets overused a lot, but very open and transparent process.
In Oshkosh, as you know, in our city manager form of government, the citizens don't get to vote for the executive. We don't have an executive mayor. We hire a city manager. So the way that person is evaluated is not through the ballot box, but through the Common Council. The major responsibility of the deputy mayor is to facilitate the evaluation of the city manager. And last year I was deputy mayor, so it was my responsibility to do that. And I set out that we ought to have three criteria in doing it: fairness to the city manager, rigor, a thorough evaluation, and transparency. It should be as open as possible to the public. I think all those criteria are important, but transparency is the most important one because you can't know if it was fair and rigorous unless it's open. So I constructed a survey, which I'd borrowed from one that the council had used several years previous with Dick Wolank when he was city manager. I tweaked it a little bit. The council met several times in closed session. Councilors filled out their surveys, it had numerical ratings, and then the results were released to the press. Initially, I thought our city attorney advised us that these numerical results could not be released under state statute, privacy guidelines or whatnot. But then she said that that's not in fact what her memo had told us, and that they were okay to be released. And so we did release the data. And my perception is we've got more open revelation of council's view of the city manager than we ever had before. And I think that's a healthy thing.
Okay. I can't take credit for the percentages here. This was done by the chief, not the chief of police, but he's a blogger here in town, and his handle is the chief. And he kind of went through the evaluation, and since math is not my strong suit, his seems to be a little bit better than mine. So he, out of 175 possible points, you and Dennis McHugh and Paul Esslinger were the three lowest scoring folks for Mr. Roloff. Let's see, yours were 83 out of 175, Dennis's were 101 out of 175, and Paul's were 111 out of 175. yours was obviously the lowest, and according to the chief's math here, it came out to about 47.4% of the total of what he could have gotten. Why did you get, and you can't really speak for them, but why did you rank him as low as you did in some areas?
I didn't perceive it as low. We're dealing with what's called a semantic differential scale. And some of my low rankings were sufficiently low that the total number comes out low. I didn't read that blog post. I tend to avoid the anonymous bloggers these days because they have very little credibility in my judgment. But it seems like it was taken totally out of context. We all did make general comments, and we talked about that in the open meeting. Generally where I rated Mark low, and I've told him this one-on-one, and I've said it at council meetings, I've been disappointed at the philosophy of economic development that he's brought here, which is essentially, let's just get something done. I didn't think we hired someone for that philosophy. I think Oshkosh has to go beyond the let's get something done mindset. What do we want to do? Right? And then how do we get it done? Some of the questions on the survey dealt with things like listening. My perception of Mark has been that when he has his mind made up on something, that's the way it will be, and that there's not a lot of flexibility. Other counselors disagree with that. What was good about this process was I thought we had some really great open dialogue and conversation. It was not at all hostile or petty. Mark met with the council. We all discussed our pros and cons. I thought he actually enjoyed the process because it's so much nicer when you get people telling you what they think rather than feeling there's this behind the scenes sniping or whatnot. Right. So while the way this individual framed it, it looks very low, I thought it was very balanced. But keep in mind, my students think I'm a tough grader. All right, I think I'm a fair grader. So I thought it was very fair. And let's face it, Cheryl, our job as a common council is not to shower the manager with praise and tell him how great he's doing, nor is it to trash him. Our job is to make sure that he is doing his best to fulfill the goals that have been given him and to pursue some vision for the city of Oshkosh. So I think he's doing some things really well. There's other areas I'd like to see improvement, especially on that economic development and some transparency. Remember with the deer culling effort?
Well, there were a number of things. It was the deer culling, and they all kind of came up at one meeting. It was the deer culling not being announced.
Right.
It was the Oshkosh Corp, formerly Oshkosh, formerly known as Oshkosh Truck.
Right.
All those trucks being stored and neighbors being upset. It was the farmland out on it 91?
James Road and 91.
Yep. And I thought that maybe there was something else.
There's
but
probably
those three
probably
things
several,
for sure.
Yeah, and many of them, you're right, did converge in one meeting.
Yeah. It was not a good meeting.
Right. But I think overall, Mark has been working, very hard to get development going, to work with the council. But again, in areas where we perceive he's fallen short, it's our job to tell him that, and that's what I perceived that we were doing. And I just thought, people can say what they want about this evaluation process, but the fact that it was, I thought, as open as it was, should put to rest any thoughts that we've got some kind of old boy network that just pats each other on the back. And I also think it should put to rest any idea that this was just a group of malcontents who were taking cheap shots at the manager. That I don't think anything in that documentary record suggests that.
How does this work? And maybe this is a question better for the city attorney, but she's not here. and you've probably addressed this with her, so I'll ask you. Because Mark is a hired employee and not elected, certain things in the past, you guys have been told on the council that you can't discuss certain things because it's a violation of his, privacy because he is an employee. What is different about this, if that makes you guys be able to release this information and basically have this out in the public?
I'm paraphrasing the city attorney here, but I believe what she has said is that the city manager is a special kind of public employee, and because obviously he is a chief executive, and so with this kind of public employee, you have to weigh the privacy aspect against the public interest in disclosure. And her argument
And
was
I've heard that before.
because,
That makes sense.
because his role is so public, the public interest in disclosure of this information outweighed keeping it all private. Now having said that, I mean, if it had been a situation where there was some highly supercharged griping or whatnot, maybe we would have had a different view on whether or not to release this. But again, I thought this was very professional, was very civil. There was no bickering in our executive sessions on this. And originally, some counselors did not want this information released, and I don't know how that would help the council or the city manager. Let's have public disclosure. I think people have a right to know what do their elected officials think about the chief executive of the city.
Sure, sure. So then, hopefully, counselors who are running for re-election, hopefully in the future they'll be able to give their impressions of the city manager when they're asked that question.
I hope so, because we ran into this bizarre situation where people are told if you give your view on the city manager, you're potentially putting the city at risk for a lawsuit.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, that seems kind of bizarre to me.
Yeah, always erring on the side of caution, and it's too much
overly
erring
cautious.
So, your term as deputy mayor is up now. You served one term. Didn't do a whole lot in front of the cameras as deputy mayor, but did do things, I'm sure, behind the scenes too.
Really, the only role that I can see in our municipal codes is to run this evaluation of the city manager, which is crucial. Other than that, there really aren't many roles for the deputy mayor that I can think of. I mean, there was one.
So you can't really evaluate your term then, as far as
no, and that's why
you enjoyed it or not.
No, and that's why when we had the organizational meeting, and Bob Peschel nominated me to return as deputy mayor, and I think it was Steve Cummings nominated Jessica King, and when it looked like we had a tie vote, Burke Tower wasn't there. I said, fine, I changed my vote to vote for Jessica. I mean, this is not something that if there was not a majority to keep me in that position, I don't know why, there were no reasons stated, but I thought out of all the things we should be arguing and debating about in this city, that's not one of them.
Yeah.
All right, so Burke had already indicated support for Jessica last year. I assumed he'd do the same this year, so I figured why, because some wanted to delay this for another meeting, what would be the purpose of doing that? You'd have some of the anonymous sniping on the blogs, and it would just be another wasted kind of debate.
Yeah.
So I think Jessica will do just fine in the position. She's smart, she's articulate, she has a great interest in evaluation, and I'm hoping that she takes the evaluation process that we started this year and build on it and keep it transparent and open. Okay. I'm sure she will.
Well, you did run one meeting as deputy mayor, and that was when...
Just one small portion of one meeting.
Yeah. And that was when Paul Esslinger had to step down and turn his gavel over to you because there were two issues that he was directly involved in. And I was kind of surprised, and maybe you can talk a little bit about why you didn't cut this guy off. The president of the local tavern league came up, and the issue that he came up to speak about was the fees, some of the fees being repealed.
Right.
And yet he really went on for a long time talking about all the good things that the local tavern league does. Yeah. And, and I'm not disputing those things, that they do a lot of good things, but I just thought that was not at all germane to the fees being repealed, and I was kind of surprised that you didn't stop that conversation.
Having watched council meetings for 20 years now, having been on the council for 3 years, let's say that if you and I had a dime for every time someone got off point, we'd be fairly rich right now. So I don't think that what Pat Pertel did was at all atypical of those meetings. My perception sitting there was he felt in a very awkward situation because he's essentially arguing to support something that benefits him. Mm-hmm. So I think he felt this great pressure to defend the Tavern League. I mean, I had the feeling he felt under kind of siege, that people don't appreciate what they do. But, I see where you're coming from, and I do think that someone running a meeting should try to keep people on point. I didn't feel that he'd strayed far enough that there should be some attempt to bring him closer. And, again, that was a very awkward discussion, a very awkward topic. Pat Pertel had actually called me the day before and wanted advice from me as to whether he should speak at all. He wanted my advice. I assume he called other counselors too. He said, will this look strange to people that someone who might benefit from this fee repeal is speaking for it? I said, Pat, you've got to make that judgment, but I encouraged him to speak. I said, I encourage anyone to speak at council meetings. We need more people speaking, not less. So he decided to do that. I just felt I felt that he was very awkward doing it, but I didn't feel he got that out of line.
Yeah, see, I didn't feel like he was really speaking for repealing the fees at all. He was just talking about the good things that they did, and that's what I found awkward about it. Is
well, that's the thing.
That
I think
wasn't there.
Yeah,
really.
I think he felt awkward if he had spoken to repeal the
Yeah.
fees, because there had been all this dialogue in the community about how the fee repeal would benefit the mayor, who's a tavern owner.
Yeah.
I think Pat then framed it as anyone who would benefit from this really shouldn't be speaking out in favor of it, which is why he didn't want to come out in the first place. But he did.
They were two different issues, though. They
Yeah.
were two different issues.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, initially, Mayor Esslinger was going to vote on those issues until it was learned that he really shouldn't. Had he moved forward with voting on those, because you're very outspoken about that kind of conflict, would you have said something, at the meeting that you didn't feel that he should be voting? Or, I realize that's kind of looking back a month or so here. But
I've learned that the wisest course of action on this council is to ask for the legal advice, and that the wisest thing is to follow the advice of the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
If the city attorney and the Government Accountability Board,
right.
if they had concluded that he should vote, I've learned that unless it's some extreme circumstance, you should probably go with their advice. I think the Government Accountability Board said he should not have voted.
Right.
So if he had insisted on voting, even given that, I would have said I don't think it's wise to do that, and I assume the majority of the council would have said the same thing. But we weren't in that situation.
Okay. Let's talk about recycling bins. There are so many people still on a waiting list for smaller recycling bins. And we talked a little bit about this on the phone one day, because I understand that people had the opportunity to get the smaller bins before they were delivered. But I think in a lot of cases, people didn't understand just how humongous these big bins were.
I agree with you.
And they probably didn't realize how cumbersome they were going to be in trying to find a place for them. So you've got 400 people approximately on a waiting list for smaller bins.
How many people?
About 400.
Okay.
And there's no date in sight as to when they might be getting smaller bins. And now there's an ordinance of sort being kind of proposed and possibly even being drafted to kind of dictate, I guess, where the bins should be kept when they're not out on the terrace for garbage collection day.
Those are two separate things. On the first one, I did share an email with the Director of Public Works, Mr. Patek, and he says that we currently have less than 20 of the 64-gallon carts in supply. Now, if the waiting list is 400, obviously less than 20 is not going to do it. He says that originally the idea was to make a trade with the town of Menasha. Right? That the town of Menasha has smaller carts, they want larger ones, but apparently the town of Menasha no longer wants to trade. They are now going to be buying bigger carts, and apparently they want to sell us some of the 64-gallon carts. We don't really have a budget for that, but I can actually read from his, he talked to the town on Monday. We're taping on the 20th. So of a Thursday, so we spoke to them he spoke to them this previous Monday. He's waiting for them to get back, and he'll update us. So it looks like we're possibly still going to work out something with the town of Menasha. But I understand the frustration that 400 is a long waiting list.
And they've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah.
And it would just be nice if he would come forward and say, because Jessica King asked this at a council meeting, I'm not sure exactly how long ago, 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, and he made that comment about trading with another community or communities, and now that's not happening, and yet people are still, now I'm being asked by some people, not in huge amounts, but a few people have asked me, what's going on with this? And I just don't understand why, when he knows that there are people who are on a list, people are calling his office asking, counselors have asked, at least Jess King did publicly, why he doesn't just say at a council meeting, you know, by the way, I want to give you an update on this. It always seems to be where people have to force someone's hand to get information.
We don't, you know, not to pick on David Potek. I mean, he's, as you know, he's in a very difficult position,
Yes.
Public Works, right? But another good thing about this evaluation of the city manager is that it did come out that the majority of the councilors want to see better communication from that office. And I'm sure that's tough for David to listen to, but the city manager assured us that this discussion is going on. How do we get better communication out of that office? You know, for example, I sent him an email and I immediately got a response on this. I think that's a good sign.
Yes.
We need to start getting things more quickly. Hopefully we'll have this resolved. On the location of the recycling bins, I raised this at a meeting, it must be 6 months ago now. And the response at that time was when the ordinance had been written on single stream recycling, they didn't include the language on storage, but they wanted to. And my understanding is that the majority of cities who do single stream recycling, or who have bins, let's say, have some language on storage, but the language is not so narrow that people feel they're being targeted by some recycling police out there. Mr. Potek did tell me today via email that the language will probably be similar to what they have in Green Bay, which basically says in a very general way, you don't want to have the recycling bin in front of the house. It doesn't mandate exactly where it has to go, but you basically want to keep it on the side or in the back. My feeling is that with whatever language comes forward, 99% of the citizens are already fine with what they're doing. But as we've seen with snow removal, 99% of the people shovel their sidewalks fine.
Right.
But you have to have ordinance language for those 1% who just can't get it right. And in our city, on the recycling bins, I think it's largely in rental properties, probably predominantly in the central city, especially in the campus area, where you probably do need some language to make sure that these things are just taken off the terrace and put in the back of the house or
There's
inside
not
or
always a
whatnot.
place to put them in the back of the house, though,
Or
Tony.
I think, but my understanding is even the side of the house would be fine.
Well, what about a corner house where you don't have a rear yard or a side yard, you have two front yards? You know, what
I think
what are you going to do there?
Yeah, I think I want to find out what they do in Green Bay, but there clearly have to be exceptions for that. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to persecute people who own corner lots. They're already under enough pressure with having
To pay for two streets?
Yeah,
Really?
exactly. But we'll work that out. Again, it's one of those unfortunate situations where the overwhelming majority of people have no problem with it, but currently we have no language. So I think I told you on the phone, I've had people call me up saying, you have to come visit my street right now to see what's going on with this recycling bin. Everything from children like literally crawling in it in the middle of a sidewalk, which I've actually seen that happen, by the way, to people leaving it on the terrace for days and days at a time, for people leaving it overfilled on a porch. I mean, and currently, if you call up City Hall and say something about that, their response will be, we can't really do anything. We don't have any language on this. So it'll be generic language design, I think, to get after those small amount of folks.
I did see one that wasn't sitting on a terrace. Somebody put it up on their roof.
On a roof.
It was on a roof. So I don't know if that was a statement to City
I
Hall.
wonder if that was, yeah.
But then it came down in the wind, I think, because
Oh, wow.
the next day it was down.
That's funny.
Let's see. Budget Committee. What's the status of that?
My understanding is we have a meeting coming up, our last meeting in May. I think there will be nominees in that last meeting in May.
Okay.
Not just for that, but for other committees also. But I don't know that for a fact.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Your first meeting as a member of the Plan Commission.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Very good. I think it's going to be an exciting commission to be on. And actually, I'd made the comment at the last City Council meeting that I think we have to elevate our sustainability board. I was on the sustainability board for 1 year. I was very frustrated on the sustainability board because currently the city staff treats the sustainability board as a debating society.
Yeah.
And I think we have to elevate it to the Parks Board level or the Plan Commission level where they actually vote on resolutions that the council will vote on. The Plan Commission does that. It's really exciting. I think right now on the Plan Commission there's a good diversity of thoughts and ideas. And so far I've been impressed with what I've seen with city staff. David Buck and is it Jeff now? And Darren, seem to do a good job of keeping that Plan Commission informed. and they have a good sense of 21st century planning. So I'm looking forward actually to being on that plan commission.
One of the, I think it was your first, how many meetings have you had where you've been on there? Have there been two
plan
already,
commission?
or just one?
Two.
Okay. The first meeting, I think it was, where the issue of the purchasing the homes down by the Quarry Park
Oh, yeah.
came up because of the methane gas
That's right.
situation. You know, and we've talked about this too, and one of the frustrating things is some of these folks have been saying for years and years that there's a problem there. And you know, it just, and now all of it, and the city had ignored them.
Yeah.
Not particularly necessarily this city administration or
Right.
this currently seated council.
I agree.
But a council and a city administration along the way for years ignored these people's concerns. Now all of a sudden it's, you know, it's kind of like a hurry up and wait kind of thing, but now there's an emergency, and by God, it's got to get done because this is an imminent danger. You know, it's just more of this
frustrating.
reactionary management.
Right.
I mean, what is going on here?
You know, I think that in the 70s and 80s, the standards for awarding building permits in this city were somewhat lower than they are now. When you look at how were these housing developments ever approved in the first place? People knew about methane in 1980. They knew what was going on over there in 1980. And even like building in floodplains, as we've done. So, you know, I think a lot of bad decisions were made over many years. And ironically, we're supposed to have a professional government that doesn't allow for these kinds of decisions to be made. But clearly, we did drop the ball in previous years. But you're right. I mean, you go from no concern to urgency. So some of the owners of those properties were concerned. I mean, if their tenants move out, no one's going to move back in. And the city didn't really give a firm timeline as to when these homes will be purchased and raised, if you will. So we still have more work to do on this and make sure that the renters, we did learn at the last council meeting that possibly some of the renters can be compensated for their move, which would be nice. We're not sure how much or in what capacity, but Mr. Roloff is looking more into this, and hopefully it'll be worked out to the content of those renters and owners.
Sure. Now, the four houses or four properties that we're talking about are which ones, Tony?
Oh, I can't remember the exact. I think they're near the quarry area.
Are they on Knapp or are they on South Park?
They're not all on Knapp. I think they're spread out among them.
Maybe on Delaware or something?
No, I can't remember.
Okay.
Knapp and South Park sound like the two. I don't remember the exact addresses, but they're in that area.
Okay. All right. So probably in the next few months or so,
Yes.
there'll be some kind of a resolution
Yeah.
there. Okay. All right. We're just about out of time, but anything else that you want to talk about while you're here that might be coming up on the council?
Actually, a crucial thing is going to be the developers agreement for the Oshkosh Corporation TIF. The council, 5-2 vote, only Bob Peschel and I voting no, approved the TIF several months ago. But as you know, once you approve a TIF, then you have to approve a developers agreement. We urge the city manager to get fairly serious in these negotiations, try to get Oshkosh Corporation to commit to having their corporate headquarters here. I've said if the TIF is 20 years, can we get at least a 20-year commitment on these jobs? Can we get LEED certification on the building? I mean, any number of things. And what will really frustrate me is if we get a developers agreement in front of us that is not requiring anything. And that would be very unfortunate because this is a huge chunk of money, $5 million. And it's a direct assistance grant, which I thought we were no longer going to do in Oshkosh. Remember, it's going to be all pay-as-you-go now?
Yes, yes.
Well, now it's pay-as-you-go for everyone except Oshkosh Corp, apparently. So that's going to be coming up soon, Cheryl. And that one, I'm really hoping that our city council demands some standards in this developers agreement.
Okay, excellent. Well, very good. I wish we had more time,
So
Tony.
do I.
Next time I'll have you on for an hour.
Sounds good.
And we'll talk about stuff. Okay, thanks very much. Just sit tight. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Dear Mom and Dad, well, I finally have some time off, so I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get through the bad ones. Mostly we have each other, and that's what keeps us going. And Mom, since you asked, if anyone wants to help, just tell them to contact the USO. You can't believe how much they do for us. With love, your son, Michael.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
We were in an emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have
Right.
beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah, right?
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm joined now by Dan Hinton. He is the he's with the County Human Services Department for Winnebago County. He's also the chairperson for TRICOM. And also joining us is Linda Thurwatcher. She is the current secretary of TRICOM. And if you're sitting at home wondering what in the world is TRICOM, we're going to tell you all about what TRICOM is, what it does, how you can get involved. Basically, it's a coalition of policing agencies and other organizations that work toward the common goal, common theme of crime prevention in the area. And that's it in a nutshell, but it gets into more specifics. So we're very pleased to have both of you here tonight. And also a little bit later on in this segment, we're going to be talking about a new website that TRICOM has developed and has online. It's active right now, but you know, we'll be, even before we get to talking about that, we'll be putting the website address up so that you can note it and go check out the site. So anyway, thanks again for both of you being here. I kind of gave a very Reader's Digest abbreviated version of what TRICOM is, but why don't you kind of fill in the gaps for me?
Sure.
What is TRICOM?
Well, TRICOM is very much what you said. It's a coalition of groups, and also citizens. Actually, the key to the whole function of TRICOM is citizen involvement. But the police departments and law enforcement in the area have gotten together along with other citizen groups to deal with health, safety, and crime prevention. And so we've kind of lumped those three together. It started way back in the 90s, 93 or 4 is when it began, up in the northern end of Winnebago County. And the TRICOM originally was around Neenah, Menasha, and town of Menasha. And as they broadened out, it became clear that they needed to think about the rest of the county and other places out in the country, and so they began to expand out, and by 2003 it was a countywide organization. So the effort's always been around some sort of citizen involvement in crime prevention. So the crime prevention officers have always been keys to the thing, but it's been connected up with Crime Stoppers, for instance, and the neighborhood watching organizations in the area. They've also had a great opportunity to do several police academies and be a part of those types of things. The newest version of that has been a crime prevention academy for citizens, which Linda was a part of the first one of those, and then the last one we did this last year was another version of the crime prevention academy, which is great fun for everybody, but also really an interesting learning session for the participants. And we've had great connections with different organizations throughout the years. They've evolved and flowed from everything from registering bicycles to doing the kind of outreach at fairs and those types of things too, with just general handouts and safety information, helmet giveaways, those kind of things.
Yeah, and some of those handouts, we can get into that a little bit more later if we have time, but, I know when I was covering the TRICOM meetings as a reporter, and that was one of my beats, some of those handouts are pretty good. They were giving out gun locks. I think bike locks were given away at one time, and you're saying bike helmets. I mean, the bike helmets are not a cheap thing.
Right.
So that it's not just a piece of paper or a little brochure, that you guys are handing out.
That's right. And I think right now the website, the new version of the website has been linked up to the different law enforcement arenas, and they've got some great stuff on their websites that we want people to be able to go and get. I found a really useful home security survey on the Menasha Police Department's website that I just downloaded and used it, and it was for my mother-in-law, and she was feeling a little shaky in her own home, and I went around. It was a nice little checkoff sheet. You could show her where the strengths are, what we could do. Hey, it says we should have these deadbolts in here. Let's get one. You got one door that's not got a deadbolt. Let's get one on there. So we did that. It was easy. She felt great.
Simple little fixes.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about, we've talked about what TRICOM is and some of the things that it does. Now, one of the things was the Crime Prevention Academy. And Linda, since you were directly involved in that, what takes place at a Crime Prevention Academy?
Well, basically, it's like an 8-week program, and each week is on a special topic. Some of the topics that we had when I was there was locks indoors, the good locks. They showed us samples of good locks and bad locks. Lighting for outside. They gave suggestions as far as obstructions of sight and stuff outside. So they gave you a lot of ideas and things to do at home. We had a class on fraud, identity fraud, some of the things that you can do to help prevent that. There was a class on internet frauds and spams and scams. And
They're
which
all
was
spams and scams,
Yeah.
phishing, and
which
a whole
is,
new
yeah,
language
it
here.
was good for everybody, because it kind of showed you what to watch out for, and if something sounded too good to be true, it probably was. They told us taught us how to be more observant in our neighborhoods as far as watching comings and goings of other houses and stuff to try to keep your neighborhoods safe. So it was very interesting.
Do you have to, is that something, I'm assuming you have to register for that, but how often do you hold these crime prevention academies?
We've been doing, the past 2 years, we've done them annually, usually in the winter.
Okay.
Around an 8-week period of time. On the website, there's a registration form, and that'll be planning session for that will start probably in the fall, and it'll be up and running. Usually we get those, we want those applications in by early December, and then we'd start running it in January and through February, part of March maybe. Is how
But
that
somebody
runs.
could apply almost any time during the year, and
Sure.
you'd hang on to that application.
Absolutely, we would.
Is there a charge for someone to participate in this?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where is the academy usually held? Is it held in kind of a central location for people throughout the area?
The year that I was in it, it was out at the Hoagland Center, which was out,
Out by the
by the fairgrounds.
by the fairgrounds.
Right, but this year I think it was at the Sheriff's Department.
That's right. It
Okay.
was.
So,
Yeah.
So it's close to Oshkosh then, really.
Right. Well, and it's kind of centrally located as you can get in the county, and have a building that's public and accessible.
Right.
So the sheriff's department worked really well.
Okay. Well, that really sounds like, how many people can you accommodate in this?
We had 15,
Okay.
and we can do more, but 15 was a good number. I don't think you'd want more than 25. I think that would be a pile. This year, actually, one of the things they did that was different than when Linda went through, it was one of those updates to the whole program, was they went and did some field work. There were about 3 different groups from different locales. So there was a group from the town of Menasha, there was a group from the Neenah and Menasha area, and there was a group from the Oshkosh area. And they went with their local crime prevention officers on site visits. And they looked at some problem areas that were having some calls from police departments, from the police department in the area. And they looked at it from the eye of a crime prevention person, and they looked at it and said, well, geez, there's a light here that doesn't work, and we need some security here. There's no fencing, there's this, there's that. And they made some really practical suggestions as a result of that. And some of them were a little more complicated than others, but it was really interesting to see the recommendations and how that went back to the crime prevention officers, and then they can take that to the chief and say, here's what people think. What are you thinking about here now?
Yeah.
It was very interesting. The town of Menasha site they visited had a light on one end of the building that didn't work. We'll make it work was the suggestion.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
another one they had somehow kind of blown off over the roof, so it had actually rotated on its pole over the roof, so that it was actually creating a shadow rather than lighting an area that needed to be lit. Simple things like that just are so obvious once you look at them from that perspective.
Yeah.
And I think the folks that go through those programs really have a sense that the police want you to call. If you see something odd in your neighborhood or down the street or something, they want you to call. They want you to call in tips on all kinds of different things that are noises and even ratty behavior on streets where there's road people using the road inappropriately in some fashion. They want to call. They want to be able to log that in.
Better to be safe than sorry, I guess,
Right.
That's right.
is the old adage that applies
Seems to
in
always
most
be.
everything in life.
That's right.
The police academies that you mentioned, these are citizen type academies?
I went through one of those too.
Yes.
In
Okay.
fact,
All right, I'm coming back to you.
okay,
Yes,
I went
absolutely.
through the Citizens Academy through the Oshkosh Police Department.
Okay.
And that was really a unique experience too. And you learned a lot about what the officers do on a daily basis. And you learned how to clear buildings, and you learned how they do traffic stops. And I actually got to hold a gun and shoot it for the first time. So my respect for the police officers just increased 1,000% after taking that class. But it really wasn't useful information for me personally unless I was going to go into law enforcement. So, but being an alumni of that Citizens Academy is how I found out about the TRICOM Crime Prevention Academy that was coming up. And so that's when I found out about it and checked into it, then I applied and I got accepted.
Yeah.
And that was more useful stuff that I could use in my daily life for me and my family.
Yeah, I can understand that too. Did you get to do a ride along with an officer too?
Yep, we got to do a ride along.
Yep, because I went through the Oshkosh Citizen Police Academy too, or I should say the Oshkosh Police Department's Citizens Academy. I guess that's the more appropriate term for it. But and you're right. It really does give you a good idea of what the officers are having to go through, because I think so many people, they think one thing about officers.
Sure.
And when you're actually sitting in a car, seeing what they have to deal with, or when you do the building clearing exercise, things just sort of pop out at you that, and I'm not talking about another person with a gun or whatever.
Right.
You just come up with, you see these different things that they're having to deal with. There's always a danger somewhere around the corner.
Right.
So now, do the other communities then who are part of TRICOM, do they also offer these types of academies, or is it just Oshkosh PD?
They do. The Neenah Police and the Menasha Police Departments do that. I think the town of Menasha does too. I'm not quite sure about that one though.
Okay.
But the links are on the website to those, and those are done through the police departments. We don't do those through TRICOM. TRICOM has done this crime prevention thing for the whole county, so that's kind of our link to it.
Okay.
And we're blending all these organizations just over and over again with different projects, which is incredibly useful.
Sure. You mentioned at the outset, Dan, that citizens can get involved with TRICOM. I'm assuming through other ways than just these academies. What are some ways that citizens can get involved? I know that I think we had one or two citizens on the TRICOM board way back when I was covering the meetings, and they were very early morning meetings. I remember that much very clearly about it. But what are other ways that folks can get involved with TRICOM?
Well, one of the things we do with the local police departments is we do a countywide crime reporter. That's a listing of local incidents in their area that's inserted into this general crime prevention newsletter. It's quarterly. We do it every couple of months. We need an editor for that. We need somebody to type that out into their document file and get that basic document out to the police departments. Then the police departments insert their local stuff. So the city of Neenah has their own insert that they put into that. That stuffing job is another job we need people to do. And then it needs to be delivered. It goes out to different places. And we collect the stuff that hadn't been used, maybe, but then the new ones get delivered to those places, and those are free things. People like to see what's going on in their own little area, and so it's very localized because of that insert that's always done. The different police departments have a way of gathering that information. The crime prevention officers print it off and then get it duplicated, and off it goes. That type of work we need done. The Crime Prevention Academy is actually run by a volunteer.
Really?
She organizes it. Gretchen Wedding is just does a great job of doing this very involved, interesting project where she brings in the people she needs to bring in for speakers. She gets the professional help that she needs to do the training, but she organizes it. This is just a magnificent job that she does for us. So those types of things we have, everything from stuffing, very simple, kind of very easy things to somewhat complicated things too. So.
Okay. Like what kinds of complicated things?
Well, I think running the Crime Prevention Academy is pretty darn complicated. It takes a lot of planning.
We don't want to take her job away from
No, we don't want to do that. That's true. And we use volunteers for our board of directors too. Linda's a volunteer as a secretary. She's got some skills in that arena, and she lends those to TRICOM for that effort. So.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some basic crime prevention type things. I realize that neither one of you is a crime prevention officer, but you've certainly spent enough time talking with crime prevention officers and at the meetings and so forth. Summer is coming up very quickly.
Yes.
People are going to be going on vacations. Not to put you on the spot, because we didn't talk about specifically what we were going to talk about here tonight, but do you have just some maybe general crime prevention tips if someone's going on vacation that either one of you would like to throw out for folks?
Oh, sure. I think automobiles are, it's an easy place for people to grab stuff out of. And so locking them is just one of those things you have to do. You just can't not do it, even in your own driveway. In fact, one of the areas that I remember talking with Steve Sagmeister when he was the crime prevention officer for the Oshkosh Police Department, he always said people don't lock their doors enough. And it's a crime of opportunity. People will just walk along in a parking lot just flipping door handles, and eventually they'll find one that's open, and things will be missing then. Well, if it hadn't been locked, or if it had been locked, it would not have happened. Even in your own driveway, the way to get into your house is through your car. If you've got an automatic door opener and your garage is attached to your house, they'll click the opener on the door, in they go into your kitchen. It's really simple things like not leaving things exposed. Steve Herman would always talk about don't leave things exposed in your car. Cover them up, put them away, put them down under the seat, somewhere else where they're just not obvious.
Even when you lock the car.
Right.
Because people who are, GPSs are a big thing right now,
Yes.
cell phones,
Right.
Very expensive stereo systems in cars. Those are the things that people target a lot.
And they'll break a window.
Yep,
will.
they sure will. They sure will. Even if you leave money laying there. I remember when I was, covering up in Neenah, Menasha, and one of my jobs would be to go to the police department every week and kind of do the TRICOM,
Sure.
this news thing, but I'd have to do the crime reports for the newspaper. And, I would see vehicles that had been broken into just for change that was laying in a cup holder. And I'm thinking, come on, really now? I mean, you got to be pretty desperate to risk getting caught and having a criminal record to break into someone's car just to get a handful of change that maybe amounted to a couple of bucks.
Right.
Yep.
It just didn't seem worth it to me, but no crime seems worth it to me. But
Yeah.
when you're going away on vacation, I know one of the big things they say is, trim back your hedges and make sure that your mail's collected and
Yep.
newspapers
That's
aren't
what I was just gonna
laying
say.
out.
Yes.
What are some other things? Because people will be going on vacation.
Well, that was just what
so-
I was going to say, is that, when we go away, we generally have a neighbor who goes and gets our mail. We either have the paper stopped while we're gone or have another neighbor come and pick it up. Just being careful, letting somebody know that you're not going to be there so that they can kind of watch the house, keep an eye on it too.
Lights on timers?
Yep.
Lights on
yep.
timers are a great idea.
Yep, and we have a motion light too, so the neighbors would look, obviously, if the motion light went on when they knew we weren't home.
Sure.
One of the things I always did too, and still do, I don't travel as much as I used to. I don't seem to have the time, but when I do, you know, not only do you put lights on timers and stuff, but you know, you can have a radio going or a
Yeah.
TV going,
Yep.
and
Those
you
can-
can have those things on a timer
Absolutely.
too.
That's a great
You know,
idea. You
so,
bet.
what other things can we talk about as far as crime prevention? Do either of you have any other tips you'd like to kind of throw out there?
Well, I don't know. I'm
Well,
let you
one of the things that they
harken back.
mentioned at our academy was that if trying to avoid crime coming to your neighborhood too. So if you have a house where you know that it's empty and it's not being kept up, that you know, the neighbors should get together and kind of mow lawns, or in the wintertime shovel the sidewalks, because you know, people will go from neighborhood to neighborhood trying to look for an empty house, you know, to maybe break into to sleep in or whatever if they're that desperate. So that was one of the things we learned too, was to kind of watch out for each other.
Yeah. Now, as part of the Crime Prevention Academy, Linda, you know, one of the things that you guys talked about, you said, was identity theft and protecting your identity, and that is such a huge thing
Yes.
these days that, you know, some people are victims of identity theft and they don't even know it yet.
Right.
You
And that's
know?
the sad thing.
Yeah. What stood out for you in a significant kind of way about identity theft and ways to really kind of protect yourself?
Just as something as easy as buying a shredder. I mean, I never had it. I would throw my garbage, you know, I would tear up stuff that I didn't want into small pieces, but not real small, you know, and throw it in the garbage. But they said, you know, that's not always good enough, because depending on how small they were or how big they were, they could kind of tape them together to get the information that they wanted. So just buying a shredder to shred the stuff that has any identifying information, you know, was a big thing for me. But I started checking my, I have access to my bank account online, and so I started checking that to make sure that there weren't any charges on there that didn't belong to me. So.
Okay, good. And you know, even if somebody doesn't have the money to go buy a shredder, I mean, they're pretty inexpensive.
Yes,
but
they are.
Times are tough. You know, tear things up or cut them up with
Take
scissors
scissors,
in
yep.
very small pieces,
Yep.
and put some of the pieces in one garbage can and another in another.
Right.
You know, there are simple fixes if you can't afford certain things.
Right.
But a lot of these things are very common sense and very inexpensive to be able to, you know,
Right.
help protect yourself.
It was really scary, though, you know, I mean, because they said anybody could get your information so many different ways that you just don't even think about, you know, like using your credit card at a gas station, you know, and if you don't clear the thing out after you get your gas, that somebody coming up maybe could use your number, or if you do it inside, how sometimes they could write down the number if they take the card away from you. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff was really kind of scary. So it got me to be more observant of what people are doing if they handle my card. But luckily, most places now, stores and things like that, are letting you run your own card through. They have those machines so they don't even touch them.
Right.
So that kind of cuts down a little bit on that area, so that they can't take the information.
Yeah, yeah. So you feel like you are better armed having going through this
Oh, yeah.
program?
Yep, I'm more observant and
Well,
watch.
good, good. All right. Anything else about TRICOM that you'd like to talk about before we kind of move into the website aspect of things?
Well, it actually kind of moves into that on its own, but the idea that we're really partnered up with a bunch of other organizations. For years, we've had committees that did projects on their own. This last 2 years now, we've kind of brought back one of our committees from an active committee on our part to actually merging in with another organization, and it's the Rethink group that's been doing the Alcohol and Drug and Tobacco Coalition information work. They have been so active, and our groups overlap so much that it was silly for us to have a standing committee. So we've kind of said, well, you'll be our committee for a while, and they're really bigger than we were ever going to be anyway. So we really needed to merge with them and say, let's use this expertise, this refund, this amount of money that's available here through the health department. So they've done a great job, and we've linked up with them on our website, of course, to their great website, and it's a great organization to get involved with. The other groups that have been kind of the standards have been Crime Stoppers, Triad, some of those organizations that have always been there. And then through the police departments, things like Neighborhood Watch, just basic, who's in your neighborhood, who do you know? And some of them are very organized, and of course, and others less so. But those are great, great things to get involved with.
Now, let's talk a little bit specifically about what's on your website. You've mentioned some of the links that are on there. What other things can they find on there?
Well, we always have some safety tips on there, and they rotate. They come from the crime prevention officers, and it's just one of those things that we want people to look at. Upcoming events and trainings are going to be available on there right at the bottom of the front page. There's always going to be some things that are just happened. The Best Friends Nina Menasha Rock and Bowl fundraising organization just got done with their, so they're on our just happened kind of thing. There's a good connection with the links of different organizations that are partners with us, but also some links that are just good informational links. They're not necessarily our partners. They're not around the table with TRICOM, but they're really good websites. And so we've got a link, a whole page of that. There's a little bit of organizational stuff in there. We always have to tell people who we are and what we think we're doing and that kind of thing. So there's that too. It's really pretty simple though. It's trying to look down the left side of that and click onto those pieces, and it should lead you where you need to go.
Well, the website address we have been putting up, but it's Fox Valley Prevent, singular, foxvalleyprevent.com. And you know, as they've said, it's a really nice website. Now, is there a place on the website that if someone wants to get involved with TRICOM, that they can submit their name and contact information of interest?
Absolutely. We have an email address for TRICOM that I check routinely, and so does several other committee chairs check that routinely. So there's no problem with that at all. To go ahead and let us know what you want to be a part of.
Okay. Just real briefly, because we're down to about a minute here, but you know, in spending time with these crime prevention officers, what have they said how have they seen crime change over the years?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that it seems like people are getting braver and are willing to do more things than what they were before. They're not afraid of getting caught, and so that's why they're depending on ordinary citizens to call in anything that they see that looks suspicious, because people are doing things that they normally never would have thought of doing before. I think it has to do with the economy and stuff like that.
Sure, and they're becoming more creative too.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, especially with technology type crimes. As times get tough economically, people are getting, you know, they're catching on to some of these old tried and true type methods. You know, these people who are desperate, they're finding other ways to commit crimes. So trying to always stay one jump ahead of them, I guess, is the
And they
main
look for
message.
easy victims too. Older people who are trusting. They will seek them out as a victim, and it's almost counterintuitive. The kind of thing that you need to tell people to do is not trust somebody on the phone who says they're your grandkid.
Right.
You know, Grandma, I'm here. Can you send me $200? Janie, is that you?
Yeah.
Of course it is. Well, it's not at all. But you can get that kind of information just real easily and scam some older person out of money.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, listen, thanks to both of you for being here. I appreciate it. And that's going to do it for us. Thanks to you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got RI on Oshkosh.